Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel, and today we are talking about teams from the VCT Pacific League. At the time of recording this video, we have never seen a team from the VCT Pacific League in Valorant's history win an international tournament. They haven't won a Masters, they haven't won a Champions. They got kind of close, and we will be talking about that in this video, but they haven't been able to close it out. Tactical shooters are a genre that has usually been dominated by the European regions and sometimes North America, so Asia, especially Asia Pacific, hasn't really had a lot of success in games like CSGO, but Valorant has been a different story. Valorant is a lot more appealing to audiences of Asia Pacific countries, so we've seen a much bigger presence in Valorant than we have in CSGO, but we haven't seen one of these teams win a tournament yet. And with the upcoming VCT Masters Tokyo, these teams are probably hoping that changes. So what I've done here is I've made a collection of stats and whatnot from 3 teams that had some success internationally last year in 2022. And that would be DRX, PaperX, and Zeta Division. Now, these teams have had a lot of strong performances, but they've never pulled through and won a tournament. All these teams made it past Riot's franchising application, so they're here, they're in the league, they will be participating internationally if they qualify. So can the history of these teams not winning tournaments change? Well, we're going to find that out when the tournaments happen, but for today, we're just going to speculate. First off, we have DRX, who have looked like the best team from the VCT Pacific region. Their current record is 6-0. They are standing first in the league. Their maps are 12-2, rounds 178 to 113 for plus 65 round differential. DRX continue to be the best team from this league, as I said, to not a lot of surprise. They looked very strong in lock-in. They looked very strong in 2022. This is a team that should be a contender at every tournament they qualify for. The roster is made up of some impressive players, and they've gone really close, and the players clearly really want it. It just hasn't pulled through for them yet. With a team with Stacks, Buzz, Mako, Arby, Zest, and Foxy9, this is a team that should be able to do it, and they've been so close. And currently, I kind of think they're the new Fnatic. Fnatic was a team that looked so strong throughout their entire history in Valorant, but they just could never win a tournament. It seemed like it would never happen at some point. People would always call them the best team in the world, and then we would get to a Masters or Champions, and they would just flame out and lose in embarrassing fashion. But they finally pulled through, and they won a tournament, lock-in, this year, and now DRX kind of sits in the same position where they've gotten close, they've looked really good, but they just haven't been able to win. And PaperX is kind of a similar story, but to a bit lesser of an extent. PaperX burst onto the scene in 2022, having a very impressive performance at Masters Iceland, and they've carried their pretty dominant performances from last year into this year. It just hasn't panned out in the way that they've probably wanted to so far. Their current record is 4-2. Their current standing is 3rd. Their maps are 9-6, rounds 171 to 141 for plus 30. So they still have really good stats. They flamed out during lock-in, as we'll talk about later, but they're performing well in their own league and should be a team that qualifies for Tokyo. They have a really impressive, really fun, really wacky roster that can look like the best team in the world at times, but they just couldn't pull through and win a tournament last year despite getting 2nd in Copenhagen and making it to a grand finals. And the third team that we're mainly talking about that had some international success and appearances last year is Zeta Division. The team coming out of Japan has a current record of 4-2, currently sitting 5th in the standings. Maps are 8-7, rounds 166 to 161 for plus 5. They haven't had the success that they've probably wanted so far in their league, but the Pacific is very tight. A lot of these teams have the same record. There's 4 teams that you can all see on the board that have a record of 4-2. So one more win over PaperX or Gen G, and they're right back in 3rd. They have some incredible talent on their team with Sugar 0 and 10. They should be able to have strong performances. It just hasn't showed up too much this year, but they still have a good record. And as I said, a lot of teams have the same exact record. So just a couple more wins and they make playoffs. So we talked about these teams' current records and their current stats. So now let's go through the international results, which is what we're here to talk about. And this is mainly what I mean, is that these teams have looked very good and have had some really good placements, but just can't pull through when the rubber meets the road, when the going gets tough. All these teams have had very good shots at winning international tournaments and just couldn't do it. And the first tournament that we're going to talk about was the first tournament of 2022, and that was Masters Reykjavik. And that was a tournament where a lot of these Asian Pacific teams burst onto the scene and showed the world that they are here to play in Valorant. In that tournament, DRX placed 5th, 6th, losing to Zeta Division actually, and PaperX, they placed 4th, also losing to Zeta Division, and then Zeta Division came in 3rd, losing in a 3-0 match against Optic Gaming, who ended up winning that tournament. So that tournament happened, and there was a lot of optimism about what teams from this region could do. It looked like it was going to be a promising year for Asia Pacific teams, but it just didn't end up ending the way that they would have wanted. For DRX, they placed 5th, 6th in Copenhagen the very next tournament. For PaperX, they placed 2nd, making it all the way to Grand Finals, and then losing to FPX in what was a heartbreaking loss for that team. And then Zeta Division didn't even qualify for Copenhagen. They lost in their qualifying tournament. So DRX, they placed the same in Copenhagen that they placed in Reykjavik. They again looked really strong, but they just lost to FPX and just couldn't do it. And PaperX, as I said, just a heartbreaking loss. They really looked like they were going to do it. It was a 3-2 match for Grand Finals against FPX, but just a rough last mat for them, and all their dreams just dissipated. So again, another tournament where Asia Pacific teams performed really well, especially PaperX, making it all the way to Grand Finals. Unfortunately, Champions would not have the same sympathy for them. In Champions 2022, DRX looked like they were real contenders and ready to take the tournament. They looked fantastic going into playoffs of that tournament. They beat FPX twice, they beat Fnatic, and they just barely lost to Optic Gaming. It was so close for them, but again, couldn't close it out. Unfortunately for PaperX, the second place curse is a real thing, and after placing 2nd in Copenhagen in Champions, they lost in the group stage. Zeta Division actually made it to Champions that year after not qualifying for Copenhagen, but unfortunately they had the same fate as PaperX and lost in the group stage. So DRX came out of the group stage in that tournament, being the only Asia Pacific team in that entire bracket, and they almost did it. They got so close, but when you run it into the best team in the world at the time, Optic Gaming, yeah, you're gonna have a bad time. It really seemed like DRX and PaperX had the top-end talent to match teams like Loud, Optic, FPX, but they just could never get over the hump and win one of the tournaments. And that was how 2022 ended for these teams, but we looked to Lock-In. And Lock-In, unfortunately, was not kind to 2 out of 3 of these teams. PaperX lost immediately to Cloud9 in what was kind of a revenge game for that team. Zeta Division lost in the first round as well to Leviathan, who looked like one of the best teams in the tournament at the time. DRX, again, had a strong performance, placing 3rd to 4th, just losing to Loud in a very tight 3-2 match to make it to Grand Finals. So those are the current results for how these teams have placed in these international tournaments that happened last year and this year. And it really looks like Tokyo could be the one where one of these teams, maybe not one of these teams that I have on the board, but a team from the VCT Pacific League, they can do it. It's going to be home turf in terms of continents at the very least. These teams are strong. These teams are looking very good, and they're trying a lot of different strats than a lot of these other regions. PaperX especially is known for their weird comps and their weird character choices. Like, they bust out Yoru consistently, and they love to do it. And that's how they've won a lot of their more impressive wins during these tournaments, is just by throwing out a wacky comp and just running away with it. They played Yoru when Yoru was not meta at all. He still kind of isn't, but he's better than he was back then. And they just surprised teams. They're one of the most, if not the most, entertaining team to watch in the entire VCT, especially last year. I really wanted them to win against FPX during the Copenhagen tournament because they were just so incredibly fun to watch, but it just felt like when they get against these super high-end top teams, that teams can just kind of figure them out, and all the wackiness and all the surprises that goes away with their playstyle just kind of stops being as dominant. So what I have at the bottom of the board here is these teams' records against teams from different regions as well as their own region. These only include international tournament results, so I'm not including what is currently gone on in the VCT Pacific League. So the against Pacific, that is just for international tournaments, not the current records. So with DRX against teams from the Americas League, so that includes North America, South America, and Latin America, they are 5-5. They have faced teams from these regions more than these other two teams on the board. So currently they're 5-5, so they're even on it. So they face them a lot, and they kind of struggle against them, but they also don't as well. So they're even on it. So they've had some decent success there. A region that they have had quite good success against is EMEA, going 5-1 against them in international tournaments. And against teams from the VCT Pacific region in international tournaments, they are 4-1. So again, DRX is the most dominant team that I have on the board right now. They've had the most games, and they have looked very good throughout a lot of this, but it's those losses, they pile up. For Paper X, the stats are a little bit more even. Against Americas, they are 2-2. Against EMEA, they are 3-2. And against Pacific, they are 1-2. So having some really impressive wins versus some of these teams. They do have one more win against EMEA teams than losses, but it's those losses that have been the big ones, including Copenhagen. And for Zeta Division, they struggle against teams from the Americas region, going 1-4 in international tournaments. Against EMEA, they have a decent record with 2-1, and against Pacific, pretty good, 3-1. Zeta was the team that took out both of these other teams in Reykjavik, so they've looked pretty decent, but they haven't looked like the strongest team on this board by a pretty good margin. Not qualifying for Copenhagen and just not having the best record, I don't see them as a team that could really pull through. They might not even make it to Tokyo, so that would be a big disappointment for them. They are a Japanese team, so that would be home turf for them. So I think it's really important that they really step their game up for the rest of the regular season for them. Out of all three of these teams, I do see DRX as the team with the biggest chance and the best chance to win an international tournament. They have a very solid roster, great strats, great comps, great maps. They really need to pull through, and they really need to win this year, because if they don't win the next one, if they don't win Champions, if they don't win one of these tournaments, their roster is probably going to get blown up and changes will be made. Imagine if Fnatic lost lock-in. Where would that roster be right now? And, maybe the organization would make a decision after that loss and be like, well, they're clearly not going to win, so let's change lanes up. And then they're a different team, and they're not first in EMEA right now. The difference between winning and losing can have insane impacts in esports in terms of players' jobs, in terms of coaches, teams, team construction, all this stuff. So it's really important that these teams find success going into international tournaments this year. Lock-in was a rough one for them, as I said, aside from DRX, who looked like they could have made it to grand finals. They were just one map win away. It's possible for them, and I really think these teams are going to be more motivated playing in Tokyo versus going across the world. So hopefully it works out for 1-3 of these teams. I'm pretty confident that DRX is going to make it to Tokyo Masters. I think that's not a controversial statement. Paper X also has a very good chance. While they haven't been as dominant as DRX, they could very well place third in their playoffs and make it there. Zeta Division is the most unlikely to make Tokyo Masters at this point, especially when you take into account other teams that are also in this league that I have on the side here in the other potential contenders list. Without going too deep into these team stats, I just put these three teams on there. Genji, who are currently sit second with a 4-2 record, T1, who's in fourth with also a 4-2 record, so that just shows how close these teams are, and Team Secret, who are currently 6 with 3-3. I put Team Secret on here because they did make it to Champions 2021 and have a decent performance in that tournament, but they did lose to Ascend, who ended up winning that one. They currently sit 6, so I don't really see them being able to overcome the current adversity that they've been facing, but crazier things have happened, and anything can happen in playoffs, so I figured why not put them on the board and put them with these other three teams. T1 has a very good roster, especially with a Saya player coming over from the guard. They have a pretty solid roster that could do a lot of damage, and they've looked good early on, so they might be a team to watch, and they might be a team to overcome the three other teams that I have on this board right now. They are ahead of Zeta Division, and Genji, as I said, are currently sitting second. I think they have a pretty good chance as well to be one of the teams to represent Pacific in the Tokyo Masters tournament. So a lot of these teams are super close in the standings, and just a couple wins here, a couple losses here, and these standings are completely out of whack and changed just over the course of a weekend. I really want to see a team from this region come through and win an international tournament. I think it'd be really awesome. It'd be great for growth of Valorant in this region, because FPSs historically haven't been the biggest thing in some of these countries, so I think it'd be great for the game. Riot would love it. I mean, they're bringing in teams from China to participate in Tokyo Masters as well. I don't know how well those teams are going to do, but they could do something. I don't know. It's kind of just to show China love because Riot wants to be in that market. Maybe those teams do something, but currently I just wanted to talk about the teams that are in the VCT League, in the Pacific League. I really think DRX can do it. It's going to be do or die in Tokyo for them, I think. Same with PaperX. They have to do something. They have to pull through because their last 2 tournaments they've had really bad results. So if they do it again, that doesn't look good on them. So I really hope that they can pull through. I think they can. They have the ability. We'll see. It's going to be a short season. There's only 2 more tournaments left, and playoffs are going to start pretty soon for these teams. So EMEA is still looking like they're the best region right now. North America's kind of in shambles right now. A lot of teams struggling. But Brazil with Loud is looking fantastic. Latin America, iffy. Tokyo right now is very up in the air in terms of who I think would be the contenders. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think any of these teams that I have on the board will have an impact come VCT Masters Tokyo, and will they pull through and win? Will they overcome teams like Loud, Fnatic, Na'Vi, Cloud9? Can they push through and wipe the floor with those teams and win a tournament finally? Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're just passing through, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be doing more coverage of the VCT Pacific as well as the other VCT leagues. Hoping to do more coverage on this region because I think it's a very interesting region. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.